Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. Now, this episode is going to be part of the series on this channel called Type 1 Diabetics Talk. And you guessed it, it's all about type 1 diabetes, where both host and guest are type 1s. And as I said, we discuss type 1 diabetes and related topics. So I'll put the playlist link below. So please check it out and let me know what you think of the previous episodes. Now, today's guest is a fellow type 1, and she's a certified diabetes coach. In fact, precisely, she's level 2 paraprofessional. She's also the founder and CEO of diaVerge Diabetes that you may have heard of. diaVerge Diabetes is, if you like, an organization that wants to help people live a healthier and happier life with diabetes using a low carbohydrate dietary approach and, of course, other practical diabetes management strategies or techniques. Lisa Lanasa, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Nayiri.
Thank you. Well, Lisa, where do we start? Okay, so you were diagnosed at age 24.
Mm-hmm.
So you were an adult with a probably pretty good understanding of type 1 diabetes because you have other family members in your, other family members who are type 1 diabetic. So take us through the beginnings when you were diagnosed and how much did you really know about type 1 diabetes back then?
Well, that's a great question because I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I just wanted to say my mom and my only sibling, my older brother, are both type 1. They were diagnosed many, many years before I was. I was 5 years old when my mom was diagnosed. Nowadays, she would be considered LADA, which is the latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, because she was diagnosed at age 39. And my brother was diagnosed at typical 13.
Mm.
So I grew up with diabetes around me. And even though, so when my brother was diagnosed, I was 10. And so really from ages 5 plus, I had an immediate family member with type 1. And of course, I always knew that they had to take insulin. At that point, it was the early 80s. They had to have snacks at certain times. It was a very rigid schedule as far as their exchanges go and the types and the times of snacks that they had to have. But I really didn't think much of it, really, because I knew no differently. I didn't know what it would be like to live in a family without type 1. So I was actually involved in a study for siblings of diabetics when I was 13 at the University of Minnesota in the United States. And at that point, they injected me full of a glucose solution, and then they tested my pancreatic function based on the huge amounts of glucose that I was getting. And they realized at that time that I had what they called delayed pancreatic function. So that was when I was 13, and I wasn't diagnosed until my early 20s. So I went years with potentially high blood sugar levels, and nobody knew. At that time, I wasn't being tested frequently. Maybe if I was ill, I might get tested by my mom, but it really wasn't, much of a concern at that point. And so it wasn't until my early 20s, I was out of the house. I, had my own career. I was done with college, and I was having recurrent yeast infections, actually. And the doctors were like, oh, well, here, you can try this medicine. You can try this. You can try this. Not one of them looked at my chart, which said I had type 1 diabetics in my family.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I saw one specific doctor. He looked at my chart right away after I'd seen maybe 6 others. And he said, wait a minute.
Mm.
There's something here that we have to check out. So sent me for blood tests immediately. And they knew right away my blood sugar was over 500. So of course I was having recurrent yeast infections. But,
I mean,
I didn't know to look at it at that time in my early 20s. It wasn't something that I was really talking to my mom about. And so, yeah, I was on my own.
it's kind of an embarrassing thing to talk about, but I plucked up the courage and actually shared my story with recurrent yeast infections to Dr. Filippo Vedia when I was invited on his podcast. I thought I've got to mention this because it
Absolutely
occupied about, I would say, 5 to 7 years of my life with recurrent and painful yeast infections. And that was post-diagnosed. I was diagnosed at 5. And this was happening because my A1C was high and it would not come down. No one ever told me don't eat that pizza. And no one. So I literally tried. We changed insulin. We tried different techniques. Nothing would get rid of it. And then I started low carb. Never had an occurrence again now in the last 8 years.
Right. It's amazing. It's life-changing.
It is.
But you're right. Nobody is talking about this. Nobody's talking about this as a sign of high blood sugar levels.
What are the other symptoms did you have? Were you maybe urinating frequently or anything else?
I don't remember any symptoms like that. I do remember that my eyesight was changing. So that was another thing in hindsight that I could have pointed and saying, well, if I even knew some of these symptoms, it would have been much easier to diagnose, and I probably could have diagnosed myself a lot faster. But even so, I wasn't in DKA, and because of my age, the clinic that I went to called me on a Friday afternoon after I had these blood tests done, and they said, you need to come right back here. And they handed me a meter, handed me a prescription for metformin, and said, make an appointment with an internal medicine specialist for Monday. It was a Friday afternoon. They sent me home with a meter and metformin. They said, you know how to use this, right? The meter, of course. And yes, I did. But I started arguing at that point that I don't think this is type 2. I have way too strong of a family.
We need insulin.
Type 2. I need insulin. This is important. I think you're wrong. And they said, no. It's fine. You'll be fine for the weekend, and talk to the internal medicine specialist on Monday. And of course, that doctor took one look at me and looked at my chart again and said, no, we need to start you on insulin right away. My blood sugar was still in the 300-400s. So.
Yeah. So was low carbohydrate diet? So this would have been back in the 90s, right?
This was early 2000s, 2002. Yeah.
Yeah. And no one was talking about low carbohydrate diet back then.
No
one. So what kind of a diet did you have?
Well, my doctor told me that I could eat whatever I wanted and just dose for it. And so I said, well, okay, this is so much better than what my mom and my brother had to go through when they had these strict exchanges. They had, maybe 2 bread exchanges and 1 protein exchange. And, they had to have this really strict meal plan. And so my doctor said, you can eat whatever you want to, just take enough insulin for it. And I thought that was amazing. I'm like, yay, this is great. I don't have to worry nearly as much as my family members have had to in the past. And this is just so much better. And technology is wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, we have better insulin now.
We have better insulin. Exactly. So
I went through that transition myself, because back in the 70s, I was diagnosed in 78. And all throughout the 80s, actually, we didn't have rapid acts. In fact, my first insulin was still pig. Pork insulin. So you had to, I was just taking 1 injection in the morning, and that was it to last me. It was effective, I have to say, but you had to constantly feed that insulin. You had to eat at certain times, and you had to eat certain amounts. However, although no one ever talked about it as low carbohydrate, there's a stigma about, people have this, oh, low carbohydrate, then you're doing something fat, something wrong. That was my recommendation when I was first diagnosed. They didn't label it as low carbohydrate, but they said diabetic, she can't have sugar. She shouldn't be having unlimited amounts of bread or pasta, but she can have complex carbs and, lower carbohydrate vegetables and lots of protein. Was the recommendation back then, and everything then flipped in the 90s, I would say probably early 90s, with rapid acting insulin. Now we've got a magic insulin, eat what you want. And so when you mentioned the exchanges, I'm interested because I think that's it's a more of an American thing, the exchange. Were you in the United States? Yeah. So for anyone in my audience, and I do have an international audience, I actually occasionally come across people just mentioning the exchanges in the past. So what were they? What was it? What was the concept of the exchange diet, if that's what it's called?
Well, I never followed it myself. And so I just know this from growing up with my family members, but it was a more strict way of managing diabetes. It was the standard recommendation at the time. And your exchanges were matched up to your doses of insulin. So with using, I believe they were using regular insulin at the time. I know that as Act Rapid here in Spain. It goes by many different names throughout the world. But with their doses of insulin, they had certain exchanges, certain portions of foods. We would probably call them our macros now. They were supposed to eat for each dose of insulin. So for breakfast, you might have 3 bread exchanges and 1 protein exchange, or half a protein exchange, which pretty much, there was still plenty of carbs involved in these exchanges, but it was just a set number. So it wasn't the amount of flexibility that we have today, that a lot of people take today, in saying, I can eat whatever I want to and just cover it with insulin because I can adjust my insulin based on what I'm eating. No, this was, you take your set insulin, you have your set foods that match these exchanges that you have been prescribed by your doctor, and that's it. That's what you eat, whether you're hungry or not.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And, overall, it was probably much better way of managing diabetes than the current system of eat what you want and cover it with insulin. Because I know that doesn't work. Did it work for you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Tell us why it didn't work.
An incredible amount of frustration because the doctors were saying, oh, just cover it with insulin. And I said, but I don't know how. This isn't working. Yeah. These aren't matching up. Somehow I'm always having these highs or always having these lows. And doctors really couldn't give much help as far as that goes. They kind of put it on the patient to figure it out. And it just led to an incredible amount of frustration.
Mm-hmm. And higher A1Cs, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you did that pretty much from diagnosis to
from the time I was diagnosed until January 2015. So it was about 13 years.
For 13 years, you tried to cover your carbs with insulin.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for 20 years, probably a bit longer as well. Yeah, for 20 years. It didn't work. It was incredibly frustrating. In fact, it was so frustrating. I really dreaded going to the doctor's clinic for my annual checkup because I had nothing to say. What would I say? They made me feel like a failure, like there was something else I should be doing or something more I should be doing that I wasn't doing. And we don't talk enough of the mental exhaustion that diabetics go through because of their inability to manage their blood sugars with a system that basically is doomed to failure.
Yeah. No, I've been talking a lot about that in our newsletter for diaVerge Diabetes. I talk a lot about mindset and how different approaches have a completely different impact on our experience.
Yeah.
And one of the topics that comes up again and again is shame and blame for people who are following standard diabetes management techniques, and they're never doing it enough, never doing it right. People dread their doctor's appointments. People lie about their numbers because they don't want to get blamed for this, and they end up having just an incredible amount of stress around this, which leads to some very trauma-like results.
Yeah.
You know, I think type 1 diabetes is trauma for many people, and the medical system definitely doesn't help at all.
No.
We have to
And
find it ourselves.
and the shame and blame continues when you tell them, hey, I'm doing much better now. A1C is coming down. My blood sugar fluctuations are so much better. And I'm eating, I'm following a ketogenic diet or whatever it may be for you, keto, high fat, low, whatever it is, lowering my carbs. The shame and blame don't go away.
Right, because you can't do that. That's
because
not healthy.
they tell you you can't do that. You need the carbs.
Yeah, we're doomed in both aspects, I think.
It's very lonely sort of existence for type 1s. This is why I think we need your community. You've got an active community online, and diaVerge Diabetes. I have great respect for all of you, all the coaches, and I've already invited Alison Hershiden. We talked about you know, how she manages her diabetes. And we need, you know, type 1 grit group. We need a community for those type 1s who want to do something different, who are prepared to incorporate a lifestyle change. And they need support. They need information, because the information isn't out there. It's not, well, the information isn't provided by our physicians.
Right. We have to find it ourselves.
What's it like in Spain?
There is a growing low carb community, but still it's not mainstream. I think in the United States, it's probably the biggest that I've seen as far as low carb diabetes management. And that's really wonderful to see. Over the last 8 years or so, the community has grown incredibly, and I love seeing that. But there is still a lot of, like you said earlier, it's pushback by doctors. You can't do that. That's not healthy. When we're proving that, number one, blood sugar levels are greatly improved. Predictability of blood sugar levels is greatly improved. Dangerous lows are reduced. Generally, people feel so much more empowered, and that they have some degree of control finally, after all of that frustration and all of that shame and blame that they've had to live through. They finally have some degree of control that's actually working. And so it's just fantastic to see that more people are experiencing the benefits.
True. Lisa, one of the most frustrating things for me is that, you know, when physicians say, okay, well, we don't have long-term data of, you know, the ketogenic diet being beneficial for type 1s. In the short term, it may be beneficial, but we don't have long-term data. Little do they actually sit back and think, do we actually have long-term data that shows that the current method of eat what you want, eat all the junk food you want, because that's what people are doing.
Right.
All the junk food, eat all the carbs you want, and cover it with insulin, and experiencing the lows and highs on a continuous basis. Do we have any data that that's beneficial to long-term health? We don't have any data either.
In fact, we have the data that proves that high blood sugar levels are the cause of all of these diabetic complications. So why shouldn't we do whatever is in our power to reduce these blood sugar fluctuations and improve our odds? You know, really, that's where we're just trying to improve our odds for a long, healthy life. And we obviously know that the standard recommendations don't work. So, you know.
So how did you discover the low carbohydrate way of eating?
I actually saw a low carb Dexcom graph, or I should say a graph posted by somebody who had been following low carb I saw this posted on one of the mainstream type 1 Facebook groups. And it just so happened to be from Debbie Wright Terrio, who is one of the admins for the type 1 grit group. Didn't know this at the time. And I looked at that graph and said, this is amazing. What on earth could she be doing? I've never seen anything like this before. It was incredible. And so I asked some questions, and she recommended Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution book. Now, I was living in the middle of Argentina at the time, and I couldn't get a paper copy of the book, but I could get it on Kindle. So I got it on Kindle. This was early 2014. And I read it. I still wasn't there yet mentally and emotionally to say, okay, I have to try this. So I read it and I said, okay, that might work for some people, but yeah, no, it's too hard. I can't do that. So I didn't touch it. I put it away, didn't touch it for a year. And I tried everything else under the sun. I tried vegan. I did, a couple different cleanses for different types of food cleanses. I did the Whole30 a few times. And I knew that food was a part of it, but I didn't understand how it all came together. And so after trying everything, there was kind of a little voice in my head that said, okay, you've tried everything else. You've tried everything else. Maybe this is what you need. Maybe if you just try it, gave it a chance, what do you have to lose? It might work. And I tried it actually for New Year. It was my New Year's resolution in January 2015. And I tried it. And within a week, I was seeing great blood sugar results. I was reducing my insulin. My blood sugars were much more predictable. Within about 2 weeks, I said, okay, this is better than anything else I've ever experienced before. And within that first month, I knew that this was what I had to do. So it was that clear, that fast. And it's been a great learning experience. I've learned so much about myself and about my habits. And so I think it's a tool for better blood sugar levels, but it's a tool for self-exploration and to learn more about ourselves and our bodies and how our bodies work. And it's been an incredible gift. So I wouldn't have it any other way.
To learn how our bodies change. As our bodies change, we have to change some of our sort of insulin management, sort of the insulin dosing changes, for example, or basal settings need to change. Yeah. I'm in that phase now, so the perimenopausal phase, and it's totally new to me. And in a recent interview, I was asked, how am I doing? I said, it's another learning curve. It's just a learning curve. I don't know, like that type 1 diabetes has always been a learning curve. I've always been work in progress. So because you can't stop, you can't sit back and ignore it, because by ignoring your diabetes, it's not going away. right? So it takes a big part of your life, mentally and physically, like the continuous scanning and taking action. Do I need to take action? All that thinking about type 1. So perimenopause, the hormonal changes, another crazy thing to impact blood sugars. I'll have to deal with it. It's like, now I'm ready to deal with it because I know I can. Right? Because I have the empowerment, and this is what diaVerge stands for. And your mission is to empower diabetics to take better care of themselves. Tell us more about how you founded diaVerge Diabetes. I think you wrote somewhere that it was your husband who encouraged you?
Yes, actually. It was late, I suppose mid 2015. It was that year that I started low carb, and I was just astonished with my results. I was losing weight. I was getting more fit. My blood sugars were so much more predictable. And honestly, I was angry. I was angry that this wasn't taught, that I had to suffer for so long with all of these crazy blood sugar levels and all of this unpredictability and all of this, shame and blame that we've talked about so much already. And I did have other health conditions. I was clinically depressed. I had irritable bowel syndrome. There were other things in my physical body that just were not working. And when I started low carb, all those other health conditions cleared up. It was amazing. And so I was really angry that I had to suffer for all those years and nobody told me about this and I had to find it on my own. And so I remember this scene so perfectly. My husband and I were in our dining room in our house in Argentina. And I was sitting down at the dining room table and he was standing kind of in the doorway to the kitchen. And he's like, Lisa, you have to do something about this. You have to get the word out. You have to write about this. He said, you like writing, start a blog, start talking about this, start anything that you can to get this information out there. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I think you're right. I think I have to start talking about this because it's been so incredibly life-changing for me. And I don't want anybody else to suffer. If they are ready to take these steps, I want the information to be readily available for them. I want people to know that this is possible. I'm just an average person and this is possible. So I started the blog. I started a Facebook page, and that was September 2015. And I just started writing about my experiences and writing about my interpretation of Dr. Bernstein's book and what was working for me, what I had tried, what, I had to shift because it wasn't all clear, smooth sailing. I had to try some things. I had to figure it out, okay, this was a little too much fat. No, I need more protein, less fat, that type of thing. But I started writing about it and started building a community around it. And that's where diaVerge started. People started contacting me and saying, hey, this sounds pretty amazing. Can you help me with this? And so I started taking a few individual coaching clients here and there. And then Allison came to join us. And that's really when everything took off. Mm-hmm. So she's our mastermind, or our masterful coach educator, and Allison's just incredible. The results that she can help her clients get it's just astonishing.
When did you create the first website for diaVerge? Was it 2015? Your website?
Yes.
That's when I just started doing low carb, but I didn't know anything. In fact, I didn't know anyone else who was doing it. I'd just come across a video by Jason Funk talking about lower carbohydrate diet, not necessarily about type 1s, but just about that how to manage diabetes with a low carb diet. And I decided to do it. But I had no idea if other type 1s were doing it or if it was suitable. So I removed I removed wheat, like flour. So there was no bread, no pasta, and no rice. I wasn't a big sugar addict, so I was still using honey. I remember I was still drizzling honey on my salads and things, but it was the very beginning. And a relative of mine, in fact, she's in California, she sent me your website, diaVerge, back in 2015, at the very beginning. She said, this is a brand new website. And look into it, it might benefit you. I had a quick look and there was just too much information in there. I thought, I'll put that to one side. And in fact, it was a couple of years ago on my old laptop. It was in the bookmarks.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I got to find these people because I was already doing low carbohydrate coaching, etc. So I've got to find these people, and I've got to bring forward this series where I can invite other type 1s and talk about it. So this is how it started. But I was sent your website, but I wasn't fully into it. I just did it very slowly. So, and it was always there. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, that's fantastic. No, I hear similar stories from other people around the world. And I am just so incredibly humbled by that my little voice can reach so many other people. And I'm so thankful for this video series that you're doing, because it is the exact same, that, all of our voices together can reach so many more people. And it's just wonderful to be able to get this information out there, saying that this is an option. This is an option. If you're ready for it,
the information is out there.
Information's out there, and there are people that can help.
True. Because when we did it, information wasn't out there. We had to find things out ourselves through trials and errors. But now we have knowledgeable people. The information is out there. We have hundreds and hundreds of other people doing what we're doing. Mind you, what works with someone else or another type 1 doesn't necessarily work for you. You have to keep tweaking and adjusting and whatever. So let's talk about all that tweaking and adjusting business. Yeah. So what sort of insulin are you on at the moment? And what's your exchanges? I'm going to say macros. So what's your macros like at the moment? Are you higher protein or moderate protein, higher fat, lower fat? I know you're lower carb.
Yes, lower carb, definitely. I don't track my macros consistently. So that's one thing. In the past, when I have tracked them, I usually focus on about 100 to 120 grams of protein per day. And everything else is just extra. That being said, when my blood sugar levels might be less predictable, when I might need to kind of refocus, I will go back to basal testing and tracking my macros. So those are kind of the foundation pieces that we always recommend for people. Now, let's see, as far as insulins go, I use Levemir for my long-acting, my basal insulin, and I split that 3 ways. So I do 3 injections of Levemir every day.
Ooh.
And what was that?
That's new to me.
Oh, is it?
That's new to me. Yeah, I've heard of the 2-way split.
Yeah.
I've done that in the past too.
I learned it from Dr. Bernstein. So when Dr. Bernstein was using Levemir, he recommended a 3-way split, and it works for me. So that's just what I've stuck with. And then I use Humalog for the majority of my food, but I also use regular or Act Rapid insulin, particularly for higher protein meals in the evenings. So those are my insulins. And I use a Libre 2 at this point. But I've tried them all. So
I'm using
some before. I've tried Libre 3. I actually went back to Libre 2. So
yeah, I'm on the Libre 2 sensor, but I'm just going to switch to Dexcom. So we'll see. I'm a pump user. So, and I'm using rapid acting in my pump, which makes it quite challenging to dose for protein. It's doable. I always tell people, look, if you don't have access to R, like I don't,
right.
have access, I can't get R insulin. They won't prescribe it for me. So I don't know if I can just walk in somewhere and buy it, but then having to do that for the rest of my life. I already paid out of pocket for a CGM for 7 years before our, National Health Service decided to cover it. So there's only so much I'm prepared, to pay for. But I've figured it out. I'm able to do it. It's not the standard recommendation. It's certainly not Bernstein's way. But in the absence of our insulin, you can make it work. You have to put your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
To make it work. The way I make it work is actually I take, because what you don't want to do is take a large dose of rapid acting insulin and then crash, because it's rapid acting, right? And if you're covering for protein rise is very slow. So what I do is for just after my meal for over 6 hours, I just scan myself and take micro doses for 6 hours, perhaps every hour. And with a microdose, you're less likely to make, dramatic mistakes. Right. So if I'm a little bit high or trending high, I take 0.6 units, right? I'm talking about smaller units every hour. So altogether, it might amount to, 3 units in total. Right. But that 3 units of rapid acting in one go, if I were to take it in one go, I'll definitely crash long before protein, reflects in my blood sugar. So that's how I'm doing it. And it kind of works for me. But Where it fails is, with evening meals, because then the 6 hours post meal, you've got to be awake to monitor your blood sugars. And so that's why I don't eat in the evenings. And whenever I do, if I'm invited out sometimes with family, it's inevitable. I really try to control my portion. And I know that it's going to be a difficult night because I'm not eating the carbs, I'm eating the proteins, and I'm going to be in bed when the protein is, spiking my blood sugar, and I may not be able to deal with it. So that's why I eat during the day, so I can deal with it. Or that micromanaging business, it's hard work. It's not easy. It's mentally exhausting, but it's doable. So if I were able to figure it out and do it, so I think other people can too. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great way to use the pump. And we have people that use injections, we have people who pump, and there are ways that you can do it with really any of the methods. But I actually pumped when I first switched to low carb. And I loved being able to do exactly what you're describing, to be able to microbolus, keep an eye on your numbers, microbolus if you need to, and be able to stave off some of those highs from protein that can definitely happen. And one thing that I like to do is, I'm in Spain right now, and Spain is notorious for a really late dinner hour. So that's one challenge that I have here. And I mentioned earlier that I do use regular insulin for those higher protein dinners. But more often than not, what I will do is focus protein earlier in the day. So I might just have a vegetarian dish, with lower carb vegetables for this late dinner time that I can dose with rapid acting insulin. And it's out of my system within 2 hours. And so that's one of my techniques that's kind of a go-to for this late dinner time. And that really works well for me.
That's
Or
a wonderful idea. Why hadn't I
fish,
thought of that?
or go for fish or shrimp, or some sort of seafood that is a faster processed protein. So I'm lucky to be on the Mediterranean and have access to lots of great seafood here too. But that's definitely some techniques that I've found to kind of try to avoid, try to not put myself in those situations where, those nights are going to be tough. But
oh, that's fascinating. I think I should try that too. Just stick to a vegetarian sort of dinner if I'm having dinner. So I won't have to, deal with it in the middle of my sleep.
well, but if what we're doing works, stick with it. If what you're doing works, absolutely stick with it.
Honestly, I mean, I'm just so happy that I've finally figured it out, because dosing for protein was so difficult. And you ask other people, I talk to lots of other type 1 diabetics. Everyone's doing something different.
Yeah.
You're more confused the more you find out what they're doing. The more you're confused, because you think, okay, now there's hundreds of options out there. Everyone's doing something different. What do I do? What works for me?
True. Yeah, it is a lot of trial and error to find out, okay, what works for me? How can I maintain these normal non-diabetic blood sugar levels? Like you said earlier, you have all of these different factors, the technology that you're using, the time of life that you're in. We have lots of kids that are teenagers and they're going through puberty, and it's a very challenging time then. And then we have other hormone shifts when we get into our age, and we're approaching menopause. And, there are a million factors that can influence diabetes management. And it does seem like a moving target sometimes, but I think being able to have access to all of these different techniques is helpful, though, because we can say, oh, well, this isn't quite working for me, but this is really working for this person. Maybe I can take some cues from this. Maybe I can learn something from here.
So what's your approach? You did mention that some of your clients obviously are pump users. So what do you think of the technology? I mean, for me, the pump I love my pump. I love my pump. But the pump, putting the pump to one side, the CGM for me personally was a game changer. That opened my eyes wide to how poorly controlled my blood sugars were.
Mm.
And I thought I was, not too bad with an A1C of 7.8. I didn't think I was doing as badly as I actually was. When I found out through my CGM, I was shocked. I was shocked.
We definitely recommend CGMs if there's any way possible that people can get them, do it. And the CGMs that people use, that's kind of a personal decision too. If it works for you, stay with it. I personally have tried all of the Libres, and I tried, what was it? Dexcom G5, G6. Haven't tried the 7 yet, but I think they all have their pluses and minuses. But just the overall information that they can give is so incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
But I think one of the keys with this information is being able to know how to read your graphs and make adjustments from them as well. Because a lot of people just use CGMs and they look at their daily information, but they never review their weekly or their 2-week or their month-long information to see trends, to see where adjustments might need to be made. And I feel that that's really missing a huge portion of the information that is available to them.
This is where your group come in handy. diaVerge Diabetes out there, so you can contact one of their coaches who can go through all the details with you on how to read the graph and what to watch out for and how to adjust your insulin to achieve better blood sugar control. Right? It's important. It's important because you're right. So many, in fact, non-diabetics also start wearing a CGM, and someone contacted me the other day, non-diabetic. So I had this rise, and is that dangerous? It's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know your context. I don't have any other information, and I'm just supposed to give you my opinion based on just one high. It's like, probably pre-diabetic, but you're not supposed to be hitting 180, if you're not diabetic, but 180 is pretty high post-meal, in my opinion. But that's, just on one reading, you can't make any decisions. Okay, so Lisa, you have 2 beautiful daughters, right? And with the type 1 in the family, are you actually watching up for any symptoms? I mean, yes. You're pretty well informed. You are, right? You won't miss them if any of them exhibits any symptoms.
Well, we've had them involved in the autoantibody testing as well. So when we lived in the United States, we had them involved in TrialNet, which had been a program that you could have autoantibody testing every single year for immediate family members, children of people with type 1 diabetes. And since they've reduced their offerings slightly to say that if you've tested negative for a certain number of years, they won't do it every year. But we still have it done through our pediatrician's office here in Spain. And it's something that we just want to keep an eye on and see if they might be heading in that direction. So far, no. My eldest is 15 and my younger daughter just turned 11. And so I'm hopeful that they might not ever be type 1, but if they are at some point, we know exactly how to deal with it. And I feel like we're well equipped to handle a new diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. And they probably are better equipped as well than you were when you were first diagnosed, because no one was talking about low carbohydrate diet back then. Do you encourage them to also eat lower carb meals like you?
Yes and no. All of the foods that we have in the house are low carb. So, well, no, I shouldn't even say that. Most of the foods we have in the house are low carb. Every once in a while, something sneaks in. I can't say it's 100%, but we do talk about food, and we talk about, what's going to fuel their bodies. And, we do use lots of, fresh vegetables as snacks. And, we're fortunate to be in an area that has a lot of amazing produce and, like I said earlier, seafood. And so we try to really stick with whole foods, low carb vegetables. But, out of the house, sometimes, for school lunches and things like that, they might have higher carb things. And so we're not 100% low carb with them, but we are lower carb than what most kids would be.
Yeah.
So that's what fits best for us and our family at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if people just cut out most of the junk foods, then they're already on a better path. I mean, most people, right?
Yeah. It's awareness. I think it's just being aware of what you're putting in your body. We're not saying absolutely never can you have a croissant or something. We're just saying, okay, well, you've had a bit more carbs today. Let's focus on other low carb things now. Or, let's focus on whole foods instead of processed foods. Just being aware of what we're putting in our bodies, I think, is so important for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And this is why CGMs are important, because you can see the impact of what you put in your mouth pretty directly. So this is why I love my CGM. In fact, that was a game changer for me, as I said earlier on. So, Lisa, you've mentioned that, finding the low carb way of eating was transformational for you. So in what way did your life sort of transform or change to the better? Obviously, A1C came down, right, to normal range. What else? You were overweight as well, weren't you?
Well, after I started, it was about 2 years after I had my youngest daughter. And so I still was holding on to a lot of baby weight. And so I was definitely heavier than what I had been way before my pregnancies. Um, and it just seemed like nothing had been working as far as weight loss went. But um, I think the empowerment was probably the biggest change, because for that 13 years post-diagnosis, before I found low carb, I blamed everything. I blamed everything for my erratic blood sugar levels. It was my pump. It was, um, I'm even trying to remember what I blamed, but I felt like I was just full of blame, and I was making excuses for everything and never really taking ownership of my blood sugar levels. And my blame was kind of I was just trying to find a reason, I guess, that my blood sugar levels were crazy. So yeah, it was a lot of making excuses and putting the reasoning for my blood sugar level on everything else except for my own personal habits and how I was dealing with type 1 diabetes, because I didn't know any other way at that point. So being able to take ownership of it and say, you know what, I have the power to change not only my immediate results, but my long-term results. That just changed everything as far as my mindset goes. And okay, I might not know all the answers, but I'm confident that I can find the answers. I'm confident that I know what to do to be able to help myself now. And that was just an incredible revelation. And that changed all aspects of my life, not just type 1 diabetes. It just gave me so much more empowerment in life because I was finally able to take control of my health. And, it certainly helped too that some of my other issues, my depression and irritable bowel and all of those things went away too. I felt like I had a new lease on life. And that was incredibly powerful.
Listen, you also work out, don't you? You've got an image of yourself doing some weightlifting, serious weightlifting. Was it
I
weightlifting?
do. I actually haven't too much for the last year. I had a bad foot injury last year, September. And so I was in a cast for 3 months. Well, no, not quite 3 months, but anyway, I was in a cast, and it's taken a long time for recovery. So I've been taking it really easy coming back. And now I'm coming up on a year, and I'm just about feeling ready to do my full workouts again. So I really haven't done much over the last 9 months or so. But yes, I have before. I'm looking forward to.
Do you remember how you managed your blood sugars during your workouts? Because you were talking resistance training here, right?
Yes, I used to do HIIT workouts, high intensity interval training, 2 to 3 times a week. I used to run 10Ks. Those were my workouts, and they were both completely different as far as my management goes. But I tested them. I tested them for months for both of these to be able to optimize my blood sugar levels before, during, and after. So with my high intensity interval training, it was a specific class that started at a specific time with one teacher. I knew exactly what to expect when I went into class. I'm in an urban environment, so this class was nearby. I didn't have to take, a car or public transit. I would walk to the class. The second I would put my gear down, and as the warm-up was starting, I would give myself 1 unit of Humalog subcutaneously in the stomach. That was my routine. And with that, I knew that after this hard workout, 20 minutes later, my blood sugar would be steady, just steady. It was fantastic. And then I would walk home and I would have an unbolused protein meal afterwards, usually 4 eggs. And this is something that I came by after, like I said, months of testing it to say, okay, how can I tweak this? Oh, this happened. Let's see, I'll move this. I had a spreadsheet that was just gigantic with all of my results in it. But it took a lot of doing, but it was amazing, like I said earlier, to know that I can figure this out. And I can have predictable results with type 1 diabetes and being able to exercise hard and do these workouts that I loved.
Yeah.
So running was different as far as how I handled it, but I went through the similar process of testing it and adjusting and being able to optimize my results.
Did running lower your blood sugar?
Surprisingly, not all the time. Oh, my dog is barking here. Sorry. No, usually it all depended on the intensity of it. So if I was out for just an easy training run, I could usually go 7-8 kilometers before any sort of blood sugar change. And once I hit that 7-8 kilometers, it really depended on the intensity of it. If I was really pushing through and struggling through this run, if I felt like I was, had to exert myself more, then generally my blood sugar would be going up. If I felt like it was just easy and I was having a great old time, then my blood sugar would be going down. But if I were running a 5K, I could do it just without any insulin, just go out for a run, forget about diabetes, and I would come back at the same amount or the same level that I had beforehand.
Fascinating.
So, but races were completely different. So races always had a spike. I think just the adrenaline and excitement of it and trying to maybe push a little bit harder.
It's fascinating. This is why trial and error is very important, because what someone else experiences may not be the case with you. So I've noticed, for example, with resistance weightlifting, right? I go weightlifting. Almost always I will have a high blood sugar, so I have to take insulin, bolus insulin, quick acting, so that I'm not rising too high. I found out from Marty Kendall that a little rise during heavy exercise is fine, but if you're rising, like I rise to 9, if I don't deal with it, I don't take extra insulin, 9.8 was where I would hit. So I need insulin, obviously, to avoid that kind of a rise. So however, if I'm doing the same resistance training instead of an air-conditioned room, because we spent 6 months in Mexico, I was doing exactly the same routine in Mexico in an open air, in the scorching heat. I was sweating profusely. I didn't need any insulin. In fact, I needed to suspend my pump because of that excessive sweat, maybe. My blood sugars were actually going down. Exactly the same routine, same exercise, but different weather. So isn't that fascinating? So this is why I love my pump, because I can suspend it rather than having to take glucose tablets all the time. I suspend it for half an hour. It's come back up to normal again. So it's a way to kind of avoid using glucose tabs all the time. So what
I'm sorry, that is so interesting that you should say that, because that's one of those extra factors that so many people don't talk about. That weather affects our blood sugar levels. It affects our results. You could be doing the exact same thing. The weather changes and your results are completely different. So that's fascinating.
It is.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that and learn
that
for yourself.
All by myself.
Yeah.
Find out all by myself. So I was going to ask you about, whether you use glucose tabs to treat hypo.
I do use glucose. It's funny because I always have them nearby, and right next to my computer, I have my little glucose candy.
And there's mine always with me too.
Yes, immediately next to my computer. These are very much like Smarties in the United States. It's something that Dr. Bernstein has recommended in the past. He's actually changing his has changed his ideal recommendation to be liquid glucose. But I just find that glucose candies like this are so amazing because they're portable. I can take one or two if I need. They're extremely fast acting because they're glucose, and they're very precise because we can dose in such small increments. So I love glucose candies like this.
Yeah, I do too. They're
like glucose tabs.
Glucose tabs. I saw Dr. Bernstein's video the other day, and he was talking about the liquid form. And so he had a shot glass with all the milliliter measurements on it. So he poured it in and measured, and you can walk around with that. You can't go to the gym with a shot glass and specific measurement. So this I like because it's easy and more practical. I've actually never used the liquid glucose, never needed to. So
Allison loves liquid glucose, and that's what she's recommending for all of our clients. There are some small bottles that you can get. They're about 1 ounce or about 25. What is that? 25 milliliters. My translation into
it will be right
to metric is a little rusty, but just small bottles that you can, divide up a larger bottle of glucose syrup or, a homemade mix of liquid glucose into, and then you have a very predictable amount that you're carrying with you. It's in a bottle. It's maybe not quite as convenient, but you can easily put it in a bag or, have it readily available in a coat pocket or something like that. So just the benefit of that, of course, is that it's so fast.
Even faster than a glucose tab. However, I have to say, if you are on a low carbohydrate diet and you have pretty well controlled blood sugars, it's unlikely that you would drop into what I think Dr. Keith Runyon called symptomatic hypoglycemia. It's like where you would need someone's assistance to help you recover. It's very unlikely. I've experienced that in the past, not since I've started low carb. So
yes, usually we see it happening with errors in dosing. That's pretty much the only time that we see. Every once in a while you're distracted. You give yourself insulin and then you forget about it and you give yourself more insulin. That's when people are having these more severe lows. And, you know, it can still happen, but it certainly happens a lot less with low carb, like you said, because we're taking very small amounts of insulin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One mistake I've done, I've made that mistake in the past, probably twice, was using the wrong type of insulin, for example, long acting to cover the meal, because
Yep.
your mind is busy, you've just prepared the meal, the family is busy, there's all that noise and buzz around, and you're going to take your insulin, so you pick up the wrong insulin pen, right? Even though they were different colors, I still mix them up. I think it happened a couple of times. So
That happens too. Absolutely.
yeah, it can happen. So so I no longer have that worry on the pump. So this is
Yes.
another reason I love my pump. I just feel like I have to justify using a pump because so many people aren't too keen on it. And so I feel like maybe I have to explain to people why I use it, why I love it, why it works for me at least.
Mhm.
Right?
Oh, if you love it, if it works for you, stick with it. So that's wonderful. And I think about that too and saying, oh, would I ever want to go back on a pump? Because I pumped for so long. I pumped for 13 years. And personally for me, it's a no right now, but I'd consider it in the future. And Allison has gone back and forth a million times. She's amazing. She tries absolutely everything. And right now she's pumping. But, you know, never say never. So
I mean, I'm even prepared to go to, the syringes if I ever have to. That's what I used for years. I'm sure you did too, right? Were you diagnosed before the pens came about?
I used syringes for a short time and then I started pumping. And then when I stopped pumping, it was all the pens. And so I still do some syringes, but mostly pens. I like the control of syringes and, you know, the predictability. I think they're a little bit more accurate than pens are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's important.
Lisa, I'd like you to talk now about diaVerge. So it was 2015.
Right.
You set it up, and well, how did it grow over the years?
Um, well, it started off, like I mentioned earlier, just with me talking about my experience, just saying, hey, this is an option. I had no idea about this previously, and I tried it after my resistance. I've never hid my resistance to the information at first because I think a lot of people can relate to that, is saying, I thought this was crazy. I never thought it would work. I thought it, or maybe it worked, but not for somebody like me. That I could never give up my carbs and nobody was going to tell me what I can and can't eat. And there must be something else out there that's going to work for me. But so those were my initial things that I was telling myself that were just keeping me stuck where I was. And so I've always been open with that and saying that I had a lot of resistance before I started. You might be able to relate to that. But I started and it changed everything for me for the better. And so I just started writing about this, writing about my experience, writing about how I interpreted Dr. Bernstein's information and my missteps, what didn't work for me, what did work for me, hoping that other people could relate to that. Um, and it's just really been refined over the last many years. In our approach, Allison has been amazing with really bringing her medical background and her 40 plus years as a type 1 diabetic um, into our mix and being able to help, you know, a variety of people from parents to adults who have also been living with type 1 for many years. And we have a few other people who are working with us as well. Corey Cedar who he heads our Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution book study group. So we have a book, kind of a book club study group that we go through Dr. Bernstein's book chapter by chapter, and we've created detailed outlines based on the information in the book. We have live discussion calls every month on certain chapters, and that's been a lot of fun. It's really even helped us, Allison, Corey, and I go through the information, and we have discussions privately too, and saying, okay, have you tried this? Experience has been, how do you interpret this section? What are our recommendations going to be around this? Is there new updated information based on the Diabetes University videos that weren't included or have been revised since the publication of the book in 2011? So that's been a lot of fun. We've had that going for a little over a year now, and it's been a lot of fun to go through. I never thought I'd say it's been a lot of fun to go through that book and all the information in detail, because it is such a heavy, detailed book, and just a ton of information, but it really is incredible, the detail that has been put into it, and the thought, and the Dr. Bernstein's own research that's been put into all of his recommendations. So it's been a great learning experience for us to go through it.
So how can people contact you? Because you do have clients from around the world, right?
We do, yes. Yes. Well, Facebook is probably one of the best ways to get in touch with us. We do have a Facebook page, diaVerge Diabetes, and that's our biggest audience. We're also on Instagram, but I have to say, really, Facebook is the number one channel that we work through. And otherwise, our website is diaVerge.com. That's spelled DIAVERGE.com. And that's a great way to be able to get in touch with us. There's a contact us page through there, or, email too. My email personally, if anybody wants to get in touch with me directly, is lisa@diaVerge.com.
Perfect. I'll put all the links below in the description, so people can contact you if they need to. Because someone actually asked on Allison's video in the comments, how do I contact them? And I put your contact details from your website. So yeah, I'll do the same for this video. Lisa, I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Oh, thank you. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate chatting with you and just being able to get this information out. We're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, despite differences, we may have differences, we may even be eating different sort of amounts of carbohydrates. And I think, this is really an important message to end this on. I think our type 1 community, especially the low carbers, we shouldn't be alienating one another on the basis, oh, you're eating too much fat, you're eating too little fat, you have to increase your protein, you have to decrease, 30 grams, that's too much, you have to eat 10 grams of carb. You're counting the totals, you're counting the nets. This is what I see all around me. And I think, hey, guys, we're in the same boat. We're all trying to achieve better blood sugar control. So we're not, enemies. Stop, the dictatorship and telling people, oh, they need to eat 5 grams less carbs or whatever. Just let them eat and find it out themselves. We're in the same boat. So we're actually part of the same tribe. We need to support each other rather than be judgmental. So
yes, absolutely. We need to be working together rather than separately, and we need to be inclusive in this, and really make sure that it's a welcoming community, because my mission is to get this information out there. I know it's your mission as well, and I just really appreciate being able to partner to work together in this mission, and I think we're all stronger together.
Beautiful message to end this on. So once again, thank you so much, Lisa. Enjoy your evening in
Thank you so
beautiful
much.
Spain. Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
This has been a pleasure. Bye-bye.